All right, I think we are live now. I always am not sure about this. So we're going to find out. I always have to test it first. I don't trust the system from which we stream that we are actually live. So let me see for the event, because if it's not, then I'll have to share it real fast to our, there we go. There you go. You can hear me going from there. And then now let me share this.
Yeah, it looks like it's live on Instagram.
All right. And now we're live on Instagram as well, officially. Took a little bit of effort there. Awesome. Danielle is here in the background, which is great. Glad to have you here. I have a couple topics, Aaron, that I have keyed up for us to go over, but we'll wait and see if anyone hops on as well. It is.
Yeah, if anybody hops on, they can interrupt us and we can just get started talking about whatever you had on the agenda. And yeah, we'll let the comments take priority for sure.
Yeah. All right. One other thing. Working on all those. Let me make sure I can see it when I try to go on from my view Tugboat from another account real fast.
Well, I just viewed Tugboat's Instagram from my personal and it was there.
And it's live. Look at that.
Yeah.
We're learning. We are learning. Okay. I know we've talked about it in a couple of the past office hours, but debris removal. I've been seeing a lot more videos coming up from contractors that we've spoken to, other ones that I follow. And now, having been in the Palisades quite a bit over the last couple of weeks and in Altadena, the debris removal is starting, right? So Army Corps of Engineers being the primary provider of that is all over up there. And I'm not going to share the video. I think it's a little controversial. I thought about whether or not I should, just because, I don't want to share anyone's names or anyone that was kind of called out in it. But there was a contractor that put out a video, and he was in the Palisades and filming an ongoing debris removal cleanup that was happening at a lot right down the road from him. And he was counting how many workers he saw on site just standing around there. And this was an Army Corps of Engineers job. And he counted 12 people that were just standing around and doing it, and pointing out, and he's pointed out in other videos, the fact that this is problematic, because not just the fact that people are standing around there, but that the rate at which the laborers are getting paid by the Army Corps of Engineers is the prevailing wage, which is higher than private contractors have to pay their laborers. And that alone. And then you don't know how many of those people they're actually billing for on that site, but they could be billing for all 12 of them at that same time. Mm-hmm. And he said he went back there an hour later. It wasn't just like they were on a break, because it was pretty much the same thing. He went back and there was just a lot of people standing around. That's one thing to consider, is that it's one of the ways you may be getting less bang for your buck. And again, this is not to say it's still not the right choice for some people, especially if they don't have the right coverage. But another thing that he and others have pointed out, going to sites that have had the debris removal done, is that they are only removing the slab. They're not. So as part of their program, they're only removing the slab. They're not removing the fences, the walls, the driveways, and they're even damaging the driveways because they're pulling up on tractors to pull out the slab, damaging the driveways more, and not removing them as part of this debris removal. because it seems like, tasked with doing is removing the slabs.
And we don't have any documentation to support that. That's just like what's being observed right now.
I've seen it up there in some of the lots that I've seen, and I've seen at least half a dozen videos of people walking through and showing what the site looked like after the debris removal was completed at these lots.
Are they? And it is for sure completed. They're not making a second path.
Yeah, because they put up a sign saying that this has been done, essentially. Saying
That's
that.
outrageous.
And just to explain to people why this may be so problematic for some, you may have, so let's just throw some numbers at it. Say you have $50,000 in debris removal within your insurance policy. That's what's available to you. And if you have any more debris removal on top of that, it's going to come out of your stated limit. So let's say that your limit on your dwelling is 500,000. You have an extra, what would it be? Call it 10%. Usually it's 5%. But let's say you have an extra $50,000 in debris removal. It's pretty well made clear that the Army Corps of Engineers, if you opt into the program, is going to utilize all $50,000 of that debris removal coverage in removing whatever they remove from your property. I haven't heard of any instance from past wildfires, and there's no expectation that they're going to bill any less than what your debris removal limit is. And so say you have a slab, maybe you have a detached garage, or they'd probably remove that too. But say you have a slab and some concrete walls, and you have a driveway that pulls up to the slab, which is the house, and all those things need to be removed because they were all damaged by the fire, which is the primary scenario with most of the Palisades fires. And the Palisades is the mountains essentially too. So the walls that need to get removed, it's not oftentimes like, I don't know, like a small garden retaining wall. Sometimes these are 3 feet to 6 foot retaining walls around the perimeters of the property. These are big jobs just to remove that debris that would be there as well, and they're damaged. So say you have that $50,000, you opt in, they come and remove your slab, but they leave behind your driveway and they leave behind all those walls and fences. It is likely going to cost at least another $50,000, maybe more, out of your limit to have someone else come out and finish that job. Right? While maybe, I don't know, maybe you could have had the private contractor come and do the whole thing for the 50, or maybe they would have done the whole thing for 75. And figuring out that math is really important. I talked to 2 people this week. So a lot of this is sparked. Danielle, you asked, so they aren't removing all of the debris, but also putting a notice that it's been done. Yeah, they're saying, because I think what they're saying, the notice, Danielle, is that the hazard, because it's all considered hazardous waste removal. So they come and they have all of the slabs up there, from my understanding, and I'll double check this, but all of the slabs up there, it's been determined essentially that they're all going to need to get removed. Where the fires were. And so I think that is a given for, if you want to get a permit on the rebuild, you got to remove the slab. I don't know if they're stating that same thing for driveways and for walls and things like that. So yes, from what I've seen, it's been marked as complete after only the slab has been removed. If I am totally wrong in that, then we certainly will correct it. And I'm going to keep double checking some of this week. And I even hesitated to put this as a topic we should talk about, because, and I've been hesitant to talk about it since this all started, because so much of the information around it seems uncertain, right? Like you hear one thing from contractors that have talked to the city, you hear another thing after the city has done some presentation on their debris removal program, you hear a whole other thing from people that have gone through it in past wildfires. And so you're kind of left just trying to use your best judgment. But the reason, though, I think it's important to continue talking about it even now, before it feels like we have all the puzzle pieces, is because it's happening right now. Like, everyone has to make this decision right now. I talked to 2 tugboat users this week. Sorry. I talked to 2 tugboat users this week. Both of them had lost their entire homes. Total loss. Let me get a drink here because I can't stop coughing. All right, so I talked to 2 Tugboat users this week. Both of them total losses. Both of them had opted in to the city program, having the Army Corps of Engineers come out and remove the debris, and neither of them had thought very much about it. They were just like, yeah, I heard it was free, and so I feel like that's the best option. And so, again, at Tugboat, we don't tell anyone what they have to do. Our whole goal is to empower people with more information. And this one is hard because I don't feel like I have certain information I can give them. So all I said was, here's a list of a few contractors that are private ones in the area that have spoken to the city, and they're willing to talk with you about their perspective on it. It doesn't mean you have to go with them, and I'm not saying you should go with them, but you should at least hear what the different options are. And I said, and you should get a quote from them for what it would cost to remove all the debris on your property. Because a private contractor can quote that for you. They can go walk the job, get an estimate for how much it's going to cost, how many trucks, how many, all those different things that it's going to take to do that work. And so, say in that scenario that we had before, that contractor can come back and say, it's $65,000. We'll be able to do everything here.
Yeah, right? I think like one of the hard things, right? Because there is the unknown variable until we start seeing what the bills actually end up looking like.
Yeah.
For the removal from the Army Corps of Engineers, like we don't have like a baseline, like we don't have their quote. They're not pre-bidding.
But we're not going to see that until it's all done. That's the hard part. Like it's going to be a post-mortem on all these wildfire claims that we do that answers that question.
Yeah. So it's like you kind of you can't make an informed decision on it, which makes it really difficult.
Absolutely. Let me see. I didn't realize I didn't even have the chat opened up over here in case we got one. Okay, we haven't gotten any questions.
I have it open, so I'll keep an eye.
Yeah, Danielle says they should be getting a quote for the whole debris removal, which you can do. You can go get a quote from a contractor. And this speaks to one of the challenges that so many people are going through with these claims right now, which is that a lot of people experience a sort of paralysis around all the decisions that you have to make. But the problem is you have to make a lot of decisions or they just start getting made for you, right? And so if your house is a total loss, those decisions are what's the value of your property, what's considered, what's the value of your contents? Are we going to get into your extended limits? And then these decisions, when it comes to actually doing work, who are you going to use and how are you going to get it done? And we know this because we help people through all kinds of claims, that the standard that people typically go with is what is the easiest decision, because everything is so stressful right now. Right? I'm already overwhelmed by the fact that my house has all this damage, that it was destroyed. I'm already having to deal with all these phone calls, these inspections, things I don't understand. And so when an option is provided that seems like I don't have to think about this too hard. This is simple. The debris removal is free through the city. I'm just going to do that. That is typically what someone's just going to do because they're so stressed out about everything else, and that there's this paralysis of having to make decisions. And so much of what we want to provide at Tugboat is in this sense that, hey, you have someone here to help you make more empowered, more informed decisions. You don't have to feel so paralyzed by all of these. You can take back some of the control that feels like it was taken from you maybe at some point in this claim. And by doing so, anytime a homeowner or property owner takes some ownership over their claims process and is empowered to do so, it always ends up better for them, right? You're never going to be hurt by making more informed decisions about your claim. And so this debris removal one is one that I'm seeing in action day by day, people just making the easy decision, which may be the right one. Sometimes the easy decision is the right one and all across the claim. Sometimes your adjuster's estimate is great and you just get to accept, but you still, even when it was great, you want to have double checked it first. And so this is just to say your debris removal and the process that's going on there and who's going to do it and how it's going to get paid for is something that you should think about critically and make an informed decision. And most people are having to do that pretty quickly. So what I'll say is, if anyone wants us to help them think through that process, not make any decisions for you, but help show you, here's what some of the information is, here's what some of the implications of that might be, here's some other people you can talk to, and these are the things that you should be thinking about. And then for a lot of what we're doing right now is helping people just understand, hey, your policy has this much for debris removal in it, because a lot of people don't even know what the answer to that is. It says 5%. Is that 5% of just what it says under coverage A, or is it also for coverage B and C? Does it also count towards the extended limit? So all these are important questions that you want to make sure you're asking before making a decision there. So that's my little bit on debris removal for today. We'll probably keep talking about it. It's not going to be done anytime soon, but it is happening now.
Yeah, and another thing to look at is just look at the history. Look at past fires. Look at what debris costs ended up being. That information's all available. There's articles about it. In some cases, I think there's like the North Bay fire. It was like $200,000 per property ended up getting built, and it was just like so. I mean, there's situations where it can get out of hand, and especially like blank checkbooks just never a good spot to find yourself. So if you can do a little research and have a known entity, sometimes that alone can just give you some peace as you go through the process.
Yeah. No, yeah, the unknowns are a little bit scary, and this one just is going to stay unknown for a little bit in some ways. All right, let me pull up my notes. I had a couple of other topics I wanted to jump into for today. Oh, Aaron, I thought it might be cool to talk through some aspects of the North Dakota claim that we were talking about the other day. So Tugboat doesn't just help with wildfire claims. We don't just help with California claims. And one of the claims that we're helping with right now is someone in North Dakota. And I don't know why, but it came to mind today because you and I have spent a good amount of time just thinking through that. Whenever situations come up in claims that are particularly problematic, or present just strategic issues that aren't as common, it just so people know, in the background here at Tugboat, we spend a ton of time just talking about them and thinking through, how do we help this homeowner get through this hurdle, right? And in different states, those hurdles are different, and the strategies for getting through them are different. And yeah, and so with that one, talk us through, if you can, some of the basics, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about that claim and how you're thinking about it right now. And I'll just say this is one I'm saying Tugboat, but I think it'll get too muddied to not say this is one that Waypoint Adjusting, which is Tugboat's subsidiary, is actually representing as a public adjuster. But we learn a lot from those claims as well, right? The ones that one of our public adjusters is actually representing and negotiating on behalf of someone else. We learn a bunch from those. We also learn from the homeowners that are negotiating for themselves. So this one is one that we're more hands-on with than a typical Tugboat claim. That's where we're getting some more of these insights and more of a personal touch on it. But so Aaron, give us the background, just the story. What type of claim was it? What type of issues were present when we came to be introduced to that claim?
Sure. So it was a wind and hailstorm loss on a farm. So it damaged a lot of property, and a lot of those damages were missed in the initial inspection. There was some supplement payments made to rectify some of it, but a good chunk of the damage to his property was just never addressed by the insurance company. And the other kind of aspect of it was just a really a lot of delays, and never a formal closing of the claim, just like really a lot of delay in communication, just really drawn out review process and things like that. So that now it's like 2 years later and his claim is still open and he still hasn't gotten paid for all of the damage that he's had. And Yeah, so that was kind of where we came in. They weren't acknowledging the damage, and he'd been actually doing an awesome job advocating for himself for all that time, and kept constant communication, really detailed records, but just wasn't getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm. So, what made me think of talking about this claim, because I'm gonna go back and forth between that claim and the wildfire claims, because there are some things that are obviously unique to that because it's a hailstorm, maybe because it's in North Dakota and the type of equipment and things like that that are damaged. But the overall themes of the claim are things that I think people that have wildfire damage should be, I don't know, thinking about, prepared for coming up against. And so you mentioned that there was a lot of damage that was missed early on in that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know if you said this, but they essentially told him, you'll have the opportunity to take care of this later.
Yeah, it's super
Right?
common, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
hey, this is a big loss. Things are going to get missed. That's what supplements are for, right? And it's an easy way. Like we just hear it a lot. It gets said with uh, uh, like I don't know. It's like an easy way to just like not have to micro focus on every detail right up front,
Yeah.
and just move the claim forward, which is great, right? You're going to keep that claim moving forward in the beginning. It just is easier said than done.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sentiment that they gave that homeowner at the beginning is one that's already being given to many wildfire claims right now, which is, hey, here's an initial estimate for this. Maybe it's a detailed one, maybe it's just a basic, this is what we think your house was worth to rebuild. And so take this and, go get some estimates from a contractor, and we'll dive into the details essentially later and deal with it then. Right. And that sounds fine. It gets some money in people's pocket oftentimes at the early part of a claim. But what it ends up being oftentimes, like it is in that claim, is a kicking the can to let's deal with these things down the road. And what people don't realize is that those things are much more difficult to deal with the further away you get from the date of loss,
Mm-hmm.
for so many reasons. One, the property might change, costs might change, but I think the biggest one is it's just not fresh anymore, right? The adjuster in that, I mean, you and I used to be independent adjusters, right?
Yeah, we have to look at the incentives, right?
Yeah, like and yeah, you have to look at the incentives of the independent adjuster, which we can harp on that like we always do. But I just remember being an adjuster. If I was asked to supplement a claim that I had worked on 6 months before, which happened, right? Because claims stay open and things change. It was such a pain, even just remembering, because adjusters do so many claims. You're doing up to 20 a week sometimes, and driving all over the place. And so if you're lucky, you'll remember the person's name, trying to remember, like, was it this roof or was it that one? Like, it's just not fresh anymore. And
Yeah. You're looking at the photos, just trying to like, it says that was facing east, so that must be the east slope. I don't know. And you're just kind of looking at things,
Yep.
Trying to reconstruct it in your head from what's available.
Yeah.
And sometimes that initial evidence is not great.
Yeah, it's not great and might be what's so funny, the letter that you'll get from the insurance company early on will even admit, essentially, it won't say it this way, our evidence might not be great. We might be missing things. We may have made mistakes here. Essentially, don't worry about it. Just let us know later and we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And what is happening in that claim is essentially the homeowner for a long time, and now Waypoint as the public adjuster is essentially saying, hey, you know how you said some things might be missed? They were missed. Here's all the evidence of it. Here's the photos. Here's the scientific evidence. Here's all the reasons why I think, this could have been a mistake. Not saying there's any nefarious intent, but some things were missed here and we need to deal with it. And in that claim, the adjuster is very frustrated to have to deal with it at all, and has been explicit about
it's
wanting
kind
to deal
of
with it.
it's kind of crazy actually. Usually they pretend to be trying to be helpful at least.
Yeah. Usually I think that's one of the unique things about that one is like they just blatantly said, like, I don't really want to deal with this anymore. It's an old claim now. And these
this
things
is
are
really
easy
helpful.
for Aaron and I to laugh about, but like these are serious. That
Well,
homeowner is
it's easy to laugh
overwhelmed.
about their disposition, like
Yeah,
but it's humorous because it's actually like it's really uncommon. They typically don't express that.
yeah, they don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
because
what's
of how
funny.
ridiculous it is, essentially.
Yeah, but like what's really important about that situation, right, is like it's not unique. The fact that it was easy to say we might be missing things and we can supplement that later. Like that's an easy thing for them to say up front. But
Yeah.
then when it actually comes time to do the supplement, like it's often not the adjuster who said it who's supplementing it. It's not that inspector anymore. It's like Cameron said, no longer fresh, right?
Hmm.
It's like there's all of this time that's passed, and then there's actually a hesitancy. They've set their reserves on the claim.
Yeah.
They've committed to like in their head what the loss is worth. They've closed the book on it, even in the way that they think about it. Like, oh, the chunk has been done. There's this perception that like any supplement that happens now is going to be small,
Hmm.
um, and like when they're big, if they miss big things, if they miss a lot of things, if they're saying, "Hey, I can only write for what I can see," that's like a common saying. Like if I can't see it, right, it's enclosed. Like maybe that'll get opened up later. We'll address that then.
The example in this claim specifically, if there's snow covering it, right? Because
Sure.
it's a winterized area, things like that.
Yeah, things like that can happen. Yeah, there's all kinds of scenarios where stuff will like a reason will be given why that can't be addressed right now, and the reason isn't that it's not damaged, but
Yeah.
later the assumption, regardless of the reason given, is going to be that it's something extra and something other than what was part of the initial loss. And it's just that happens over and over.
Yeah.
It's very common. And so it's just something to be aware of when you're managing your claim. Those battles are difficult, and a lot of times the other one we didn't touch on as much is like sometimes it's difficult because the evidence is destroyed, and the sad truth is that it's really difficult to get the insurance company to assume anything in your favor.
Yeah. Now let's relate that. So that we're talking about a specific claim, a hail claim and a hail wind claim that happened a long time ago. These wildfire claims are all fresh. They're becoming less and less fresh every day. Now it's been 6 weeks since the Palisades and Eaton fire. It's now been several months since the Camarillo wildfires. Those ones are not feeling so fresh anymore. What can this look like for a total loss claim? Like those ones should be clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
An estimate or an adjuster paid the coverage A limit, but they didn't include the extended limits, so just someone I talked to yesterday, their coverage A limit was around 500,000. Their extended limit was an additional $250,000 on top of that, just on the coverage A. That's not talking about any other coverages. So just that. So imagine, and the insurance company pays that $500,000. Homeowner thinks like, this is great. I got my 500,000. And the adjuster said, you know what? If it ends up costing more than 500,000, just let us know. Well, it'll be pretty easy to take care of it when the time comes. If that's the sentiment that's given in their letter, and maybe even by the adjuster when they do it, what might that person experience if they just, like they're almost being instructed to, kick that can down the road of trying to think through whether or not they need that additional $250,000?
Yeah.
What might the consequence be?
Yeah. So I mean, right now is the time to document and justify the full expense, right? That's right now. Later, yeah, you're gonna just come up against a lot of resistance, especially as it pertains to like some people we got asked previously, like, oh, can I just go buy a new house, right, with this money, and then they'll just pay the limit if the house costs more, and it's like, I wish, like that would be really cool. But that's just not how it works.
But Aaron, they made it sound so easy in their letter that they
I
sent.
know. Yeah. So you're going to have to like just as you think through that additional extended coverage limit, and a 50% extension is actually uncommon. I don't see that a lot. That's a pretty massive extended coverage limit. But that makes it all the more difficult to actually utilize. And now you have this kind of massive undertaking of proving that the loss that you incurred, it's not about what you end up buying in the end or what it costs to rebuild later. The challenge is proving that you lost that additional $250,000
Yeah, exactly.
and that's hard to do when you're just like when you have nothing to show.
Yeah.
And
Danielle put a good note in here. She said, I was told by a State Farm adjuster in particular that they can't estimate for any extended coverage. So I want to use that scenario right now for what that might mean. So that means that in this version that I was talking about, that we're going to stick with the $500,000 number. That's your coverage A limit. That means that this adjuster would not be allowed to write an estimate for anything above that. That is the limit that he's allowed to write his estimate to. And so he writes you an estimate and gets it to 500,000. Maybe it's 498, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Right up to that.
510, right?
510, yeah. Right. Say, and feels like he's done a favor and says, you know what, if you ever need more of this, just let us know. This is State Farm. So almost certainly that adjuster will not be the adjuster come later, right? And what will often happen in that exact scenario? So say 6 months or a year from now, you get an estimate from your contractor, and your contractor's estimate, surprise, surprise, is $750,000 to rebuild your house or more, whatever it is. And you submit that to State Farm, and there is a very good chance that the new adjuster that's there will look at that original $500,000 estimate through the perspective of whoever wrote this before was writing an estimate that was trying to be accurate to the cost of rebuilding this house.
Camera won't focus.
Make your camera focus, Aaron.
I don't know. I think because the sun's setting.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. It only works in good lighting.
We gotta get you a new camera.
But yeah, sorry to
now.
interrupt you. I mean,
No. So the next adjuster, and I'm telling this because it's important, and we see it happen all the time. The next adjuster will most likely look at that previous adjuster's estimate of $500,000, and the perspective is going to be, oh, this past adjuster thought it was only going to cost $500,000 to rebuild this house. Why does this contractor suddenly think that it's going to cost $750,000? That's so much more money, right? Like how is there this big of a gap? When in reality, the whole premise on the first part of it was that adjuster was never saying this house isn't near 750. He was only allowed to write to 500. And so that's what he wrote towards. That disconnect right there and the issues that it might cause are extensive, right? And not being able to communicate that well, or even set expectations well in the beginning. And I want to rewind and think through, how can someone set themselves up for success in this same scenario? One of the other things Danielle said is on the policyholder to prove the extended coverage would have to be included in the rebuild, right? And so she's talking to your point about if that person decided to buy a house elsewhere. In that scenario, even more important, like you need to prove now, as soon as possible, that it would cost $750,000 to rebuild your house. Because
as it was
before, gather all the documentation you can, talk to contractors, get estimates to prove, no. I need this $750,000 and I need it as soon as possible, because that's what it would cost to rebuild my house. And even if this is where I would say it's important to take those steps as the homeowner, the policyholder, even if they're not going to abide by it right away, right? Because in this scenario, say you got the $500,000, you have that estimate, you have a new adjuster later, and that adjuster is trying to tell you, well, the past adjuster said this should only cost 500. You can go to your documentation and be like, actually, no, like it was really clear back then that estimate was too low, but they weren't willing yet to write it higher. I've since in the interim, and I made that known to them. Here's the email. Here's the letter I sent them, letting them know that I expected this to cost a lot more based off of what I was hearing from contractors. And here's the estimates I've been providing, showing that it would cost more. I really need these extended limits as soon as possible, whether it's for my next rebuild or whether it's for buying a house elsewhere.
And better yet, right? Like in this scenario, and this is a very real scenario that you painted, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
they're going to write to the policy limit. Like
Yeah.
this is going to happen. Somebody like people are dealing with this right now. And it's like in this scenario, the best thing to do is just get in writing from the adjuster that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
If you can get them like in an email, like, hey, yeah, no, I know it's more. This is just the coverage limit that I have to like write to right now. Like if you can get that written down and get that sentiment from them so that you're not, because again, even the way that you presented it, let's say you go tomorrow and you get a contractor estimate to put up against that one, but we haven't established from the carrier adjuster that what the intent behind that and that it wasn't intended to fully replace your home. You're still going to have a challenge.
Yeah. Exactly. It's still going to be a challenge. Danielle says, yeah, the cost of buying a new home should include the cost of the rebuild plus the extended coverage. Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to someone today about a specific claim because the homeowner's thinking of buying somewhere else. And it's just like with where home prices are right now, they're not going down at all. It's not like the market is in a dip. And most homes in the Palisades and elsewhere are underinsured to some degree in some way. So if you are going to buy elsewhere, you're almost certainly going to be paying more. Right. And so that extended limit becomes paramount. And maybe Danielle, if you're in the background, if you're at a computer, maybe you can help us find this. But there is some notice. I meant to get this prepared and I should have from the Department of Insurance, I don't think just for this wildfires, but for past ones, that talks about not the requirement, because notices from the Department of Insurance don't outline requirements usually. Recommendations and encouragements and pleas to include not just extended limits, but the code upgrade as well. I know in particular it talked about the extended limits. So anyways, that was a long way of talking through how important it is for you at this stage in your claim, whether you're a few months out and it's the Camarillo ones and you haven't started rebuilding yet, or you have, or you're one of these ones that just happened 6 weeks ago in the Eaton or Palisades fire. If you have not yet been paid your extended limits, it is time to start addressing that with your insurance adjuster as soon as possible and asking them explicitly, hey, how am I going to get access to my extended limits? Can you outline very clearly for me what you expect from me to be able to do that? And that way they can give you the roadmap to do it. Because sometimes an adjuster, they may not even quite know. They may need to ask their supervisor, figure out, hey, what do I actually need from someone to get access to these extended limits? What documentation is it 3 estimates from contractors? Does the work have to have been started? It's like, is it something from an architect? Like what does it need to be to actually get it? Because people can't go and spend that money before. No one has the extra $250,000 to go and spend. Do I need to incur it? Do I have to have a contract that says it, that I've signed, whatever it might be? Unfortunately, every insurance company's answer is likely going to be different, and you might get a different answer from one adjuster to the next. But what they put in writing to you is important. So Danielle says also with ordinance and law, they say it's an incurred cost, but it doesn't actually need to be incurred. It just needs to be proved that this is what it would cost. Yeah, that is one of the notices that I think Department of Insurance put out as well. So typically ordinance and law is paid as incurred, as is other pieces of your policy. Doesn't mean that you have to spend the money, but as incurred means that you have to have incurred an invoice or a debt essentially that you owe someone that money. So usually that means an invoice from a contractor, even an estimate from a contractor might be appropriate sometimes. Right now, with the Department of Insurance, they're saying, hey, we need to make it easier for people to get access to these funds. So they shouldn't have to provide the fact that they've incurred this. If they can just prove that it would cost this, let's go ahead and pay that to them. Aaron, I'll let you explain this. We've talked about it a lot. Why does someone, if they're planning to rebuild and their adjuster has said, hey, you know what? Yeah, here's 500. It might cost 750, but why don't you go hire a contractor, get started, and let's see where this goes. We'll document things, see what the costs are like, and if it grows above that cost, then we'll start looking at that extended limits. What are the various reasons why someone might want to push back on that and try and make sure that they get all the money they can from their policy up front, rather than trying to get it piecemeal as the claim goes on? What are some of the reasons you can think of?
I mean, all the reasons we said before, plus, I guess the idea that like you have this kind of incremental burden of proof that's gonna be like throughout the process. Then, where you're just you're gonna be exhausted having to provide evidence for every little thing, and it changes the dynamic where instead of them doing their best to adjust the value of the claim, it's now them sitting back and like deciding whether, like, it puts you at the wrong negotiation position. Now they're deciding whether to approve like the additional things that you're submitting, and like you're essentially letting them off the hook from adjusting it fairly up front. And now and accepting that responsibility, which is really, like, it's a really difficult place to come from, and like very likely it's not going to be the same person that you're talking to later. It's going to be somebody else relying on that file, and they're going to assume things about like the estimate that they had from the adjuster. They're going to assume things about the state of the property. They're not going to remember. They're not going to know. And like, now's the time to get that figured out. And then you also just have the hassle of like, if they're releasing it to the like later down the road, and there's like new documentation that's required to get like depreciation released on this portion, or to get it, like, it's just, there's just a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, those are great reasons. Another one I can think of, sorry, my notifications keep going off really loud here. Another one I can think of is you may not get to start with the contractor you wanted to if you don't have those funds available at the beginning. So a good contractor generally wants to know the budget that they have to work within. And we're just going to keep using the same scenario, $500,000. If you tell the contractor, I have $500,000 now, my adjuster tells me I might have access to another 250. What can you do? That contractor is going to look at that job as a $500,000 job. They're not going to risk committing to a $750,000 job and just hope that your insurance company is going to do right by you. It would be dumb if they did. So all that to say is, when you're talking to contractors about the work that they're going to do on your house, they're looking at it like a $500,000 job. They're not looking at it like a $750,000 job. And that's really unfortunate. You are not going to get to talk about the finishes that you want to talk about. You may have ideas about, again, you're rebuilding this house from the ground up, right? You may want to make upgrades to it. You may want to change things about it. You may want to build it differently than it was before. And you want to be able to think about it completely. Your adjuster is going to hold it against you the moment you do anything different than what was there previously in the negotiations. So if you're having this conversation later with them about, the job costs an extra $250,000 now, the adjuster might look at the plans that were submitted and come and stop by the job and see, like, well, you added windows over here and it looks like you added some square footage over here. That's the reason it costs $250,000 more.
Yeah, we're not going to pay for the permits because you changed the footprint of the house, and that's why you had to get new permits. And it's
That's
just
why
like
you had to
all.
get this permit. That's why you had to do this, and I mean, there's all kinds of things, and I have seen it so many times where it's just like, oh, they changed things. That's why it costs more. It's like, no. We've outlined what those additional costs are. Those are these right here. Yes, there's some extra windows, but they compensated for it because they used to have a tile roof and they're going to go to a shingle roof now. And they made changes. And so it kind of balances out, maybe not a little bit, but certainly it's not $250,000 worth. And so all that to say is like those conversations are difficult and frustrating and drawn out to have with your adjuster. It's better to avoid them. So if you can, on the front end, be able to tell your contractor, I have $750,000 and this is everything I have to rebuild my home. What can we do?
Yeah.
That is your best case scenario in what we're talking about to go through this. Danielle's giving us a couple more notes here. Let me read through these. Safety of those living in your home. It's important to stay up to date. Yeah. She says, for the safety of those living in your home, it's important to stay up to date on any code changes pertaining to weather, fire safety, plumbing, wiring, handicap accessibility, paying out of pocket for renovations to comply with new mandatory state codes. Yeah, there's going to be so many code upgrades. There's going to be more. I would assume that the vast majority of homes in the Palisades will require fire protection systems that weren't there before. She says, if your home needs to be replaced, repaired, or upgraded after a loss, ordinance and law insurance will help pay for the efforts needed to meet current and building laws and ordinances. And again, the vast majority of these homes are going to need a lot of code upgrade. So,
which is usually capped and limited, but it's an
Yeah.
additional coverage within your policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me double check and see if there's any comments that we've missed here. I don't think so. Sometimes it doesn't share the ones on Instagram. And double check. And sometimes people will send messages, which is not the ideal way to receive a question here. Let me see. Looks like we did get a message actually. And, oh, okay, no, it is working.
Kurt just asked, how do you know if they need upgrades?
That's a good question.
Yeah, like where should people be looking to know what's required by code? I mean, a lot of times it's I guess if you have a contractor and you're moving forward with a job, they're going to be responsible for looking that up. But if you're trying to negotiate this on the front end, now it falls to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it is why it is paramount to have a contractor involved, or at least, I mean, maybe you have a public adjuster involved that is really well educated on these things as well. But to have an expert involved that understands local code and code upgrades, there is a 98% chance that your adjuster does not. Right? I'm not an expert in code upgrades in California. I probably know more than most catastrophe adjusters that are visiting and adjusting these claims, right? But I would be calling a contractor out here, right? Yeah. Talking to an architect out here, maybe even calling the city. There's a lot of different things you can do, but generally, if you want to negotiate for those code upgrades, there's a good chance it's going to be a good idea for you to talk to a contractor about it. Maybe even pay them for their time, for an estimate, for a report from them. You can let contractors know. There are building consultants you can talk to that would be local, but don't assume that your adjuster from your insurance company would know what the code upgrades were. So the question is, how do you know? Let me just throw his up here. Yeah. How do they know if they need code upgrades? Checking local permits. So yeah, you can check local building code. Most of that's available online. Yeah, it is not fun to read and it's very confusing. So it would likely be better for you to talk to a contractor or even to call the city. LA did something pretty cool. Anyway, and I don't know if it's actually still up or not. They set up a an area where it was supposed to be like a one-stop shop for the city for you to talk to building and safety, for you to talk to kind of all the different city programs that you would need to get up to speed on rebuilding. And so those people would have a lot of information, and you can specifically ask. There's something called Title 24 in California that has to do with energy efficiency. You can ask them, you can look up that online and be like, what are the requirements for that? And just in reading through that, you can imagine which parts that your home didn't have. It'll talk about the quality of windows that you need and the insulation and the energy efficiency and the HVAC system, the type of roof that's required. And you'll likely look at that and be like, oh my gosh, my home didn't have the vast majority of these things on it. That means that any of those things that are included in the roof, the windows, the electrical system, the HVAC, all of those may be able to be included in the code upgrade line items. So we're getting deep into code upgrade there. I'm going to open up. My windows get all stuffy in my office here. All right, we've got 8 more minutes. That's how much more time we've got. It's flying right through these. All right. Any last topics that you wanted to go through, Aaron? I'm going to pull up a couple of other things.
I just wanted to touch back on when you were talking about for incurred, right? And how it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have paid it. And that a invoice is often good, but the scenario where you can maybe get away with an estimate, right, is if you have a work authorization. Like if you have a signed work authorization and an estimate, you should be able to make that work.
Yeah, that's true. That's with incurred. One of the things that I'll post about from Tugboat probably today, maybe tonight or tomorrow. We started a newsletter as founders. That's Aaron and I. I've written the first 2 volumes. I'm going to make Aaron write some of the follow-up ones soon. It's hosted on LinkedIn, but it's another area where we dive deep on things. Some of it is maybe a little less relevant to your wildfire claim, but relevant to how we're thinking about Tugboat and what we're trying to build. And so I wanted to highlight the one that we put out today. This one is titled Behind the Net. And I'll share it here on the screen actually real fast. Let me put this up here and I'll talk through it because there's a couple points from it that I wanted to talk about.
How do you make Kurt's comment
go away? I just click on it, I think. It's gone now.
Right, quite enduring.
Yeah, quite enduring. Let me see, just a second. All right, right here. This is the article on LinkedIn. It's called Behind the Net, InsurTech for Insured. So I'll spend the last 5 minutes or so talking about what we were thinking about as we put this edition of this newsletter together. And we're doing just one post on this every 2 weeks right now. Hopefully we'll have the time to post more on it. When we started building Tugboat, we knew from the start that there is one challenge that we would face. And that is that when you're building in this industry, when you're building a new technology specifically and a new service in insurance claims, the vast majority of things that are going to be built is going to be things that help the insurance company. And the reason for that is they're the ones with all the money. They pay out the claims. So even new claims, even if there is new claim software that is meant to, or it says that it helps the homeowner through the process, right? If there's new underwriting walkthroughs that make it a little bit easier for you, if there's a new contractor connection software that connects the contractor to the insurance company, these are all things that are the incentives behind them are built to make the process for the insurance company more efficient, more effective, more profitable for them. And it's not just technologies. It's what independent adjusting firms will tell the insurance company when they're trying to get a new contract is we can run claims faster, more effectively, and cheaper for you, right? And so it's all to align with that. And the word is more profitable. Danielle says, yeah, the word is more profitable for them. And so when we built Tugboat, one of the challenges was that we wanted to build something that was for the policyholder. That was the passion behind it when we thought of it was people are being left behind in the claims process. How can we do something that helps them? And I'll be honest, as we thought about it from the beginning, even it was easy to get distracted. We're like, well, how can we build this in a way that instead of the policyholder, the insurance company might just want to use this to help them through the process, because it's easier to think through how can I get one big contract there and they'll be happy with it and that'll be easier money. So all that to say, this article is about how we committed to build Tugboat for the policyholder, right? It doesn't mean that I don't know, Tugboat will never talk to an insurance company or try and make the process better for them, maybe in some way, but what we committed to and what we will continue to be committed to is building with our priority and our incentives aligned to make the process better for the policyholder. And it was cool to reflect on that some, Aaron, this week, even as I wrote the first draft of it. And I don't know if you experienced this too, as you kind of revised it and helped me through it, is that it helped cement it in my head a little bit more. Just the idea
it's
of
good to revisit the why, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, we see it in the individual claims every day, but like getting back to kind of like just restating and revisiting the heart behind it, the commitment, and I think one of the things you said, like it like more than just making the process easier for the homeowner, or like it's less than that, right? Like truly aligning our incentives. It's like, well, we want them to have better outcomes. It's not just about making it easier. And sometimes, unfortunately, like getting a good outcome means you have to work, but putting in that extra work and letting people know where those opportunities are and how to be successful in their claim is definitely a departure from typical insurtech.
Yeah. So anyways, if you're interested in hearing more about that, read that article. It's pretty short. So is the first one that we wrote on there. We're going to write some every 2 weeks. Most of them will relate pretty specifically into what we're doing at Tugboat and why we're doing it and how we are. Some will be more founder or startup focused as well, but wanted to give people some more insight into Tugboat. We often find that there are a lot of questions, even suspicions around what we're building and why we're building it and who are you guys and what are you doing, essentially, because no one else right now is building something exactly like Tugboat. There are some other similar types of things, and public adjusters serve a very similar problem. But as far as an insurtech solution, and so there is a lot of suspicion around it. And so a lot of us putting these articles together is just for us to put it out there. Hey, this is why we're doing it, how we're doing it, what we're trying to accomplish, and to be really clear about it. And this, I enjoyed putting this together as one of the early ones for us to, like you said, Aaron, revisit the why. We're building Tugboat to help policyholders, to help the insureds. That's why I named the article InsurTech for Insureds. And it'll continue to be that. We see no future where we shift our focus away from you, that we want to grow what that means, meaning optimizing processes for contractors and homeowners together, helping that. But ultimately with you as the homeowner, the property owner, the policyholder in mind. So thanks everyone for joining us today for another Tugboat office hour. Love being able to talk through these things. Love the questions that we get from you guys throughout the week as we follow up. Most of the time when we get questions, we answer with a message or we'll meet with you during the week. One of our claim experts will, but we also get the opportunity to talk about those things here. If you have any specific questions, you can put them in a comment to this video as opposed to Facebook. But the easiest way to get an answer is to send us a message. You can do it at hello@tugboat.claims as an email, as a DM. But the best message, the best way to send us a message is to create an account on Tugboat.claims. And so if you do that, it's free for wildfire. We never even said that this whole time. Tugboat Membership is free for anyone affected by the wildfires. So you can create an account there, even if it's just to talk with us a little bit with the questions that you have about your claim. Happy to do that. So thanks again for joining us. Aaron, thanks for sharing here as well. Danielle, I know you're in the background. Thanks for your notes. And we will see you all next week, Wednesday, 3:00 Pacific Standard Time for the next open office hours for Tugboat. Thanks, everyone.